Hi there, and welcome to Talking True. As always, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I cannot wait to dive into today's theme, which is going to be looking at saints, sages, and siddhas and the miracles that happen around them. Joining me again today is Te'Devan Kriyavan Kurzweil, and I'm thrilled to have him back. And if you haven't watched the Nadi Leaf episode, and the crazy machete yielding healer episode, make sure and watch those two. I have the links underneath in the show notes. So, Te'Devan, welcome. It's great to have you here again today.
It's great to be back. I've really enjoyed our conversations from before and continuing
Yeah.
some of the topics.
So, why don't we just kind of dive into what got you started on the whole spiritual journey and seeking scene?
Yeah.
How did that all kind of pan out? What happened?
So I always had an interest, but I think it was I was always seeking. But the kind of blow the roof off the house moment was I had a knee injury in college at my mom's local, spa gym. There was a asana yoga instructor, and I mentioned my knee injury, which had been really driving me crazy for 2 years. And I'd done everything that I was supposed to do, but it really wasn't getting better. And I was very frustrated. And she said, there's this couple and they helped me, and I think they can help you. And I said, great. And they did Tai Chi Qigong. And I went over there and I felt my legs start shaking and twitching. I felt heat. I saw colors, all these sensations. I even remember at one moment, I almost thought I was going to start bawling, but I didn't understand why. And I sort of pushed that out because I didn't know what to make of the emotions. I was going there consciously for physical healing. I wasn't interested in anything else. And it's kind of funny because years later, when I was in the early stages of doing healings in New York, I remember this one guy came up to me. He was like, real New York. He's like, I don't know what you're doing. Frankly, I don't care. But I've been watching these people walk away, after you're done, and I want to feel like that. So do what you do. And I myself had a kind of a similar mentality about it. So yeah, I got off that table, and it was the best my knee had been in 2 years. And I saw them for a few more sessions, and then so I knew that qigong and tai chi were very real, and I wanted to find someone else to awaken that within me. And next year, I was in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I graduated University of Michigan, and there was this Tai Chi Qigong master, and I used to see him. And my friend's dad, this is a long time ago, said, "Look him up in the yellow pages." I was like, "Okay." So I call him up, and he's like, he's very straight to the point. He's like, "Who told you?" And I was like, da da da. He's like, "Okay, come over." That was our whole conversation. And then I'd sit in front of him, and then he'd just start. And after about 5 to 10 minutes, I would just be out, like deep coma sleep. And I didn't really know what was happening. At that point, my knee was obviously much better. I didn't even really fully understand what I was there for. I didn't have this concept of transmission. I just knew this guy was a master and something was happening. So I just kept showing up. And then that awoke in my ability, which came forward a few days after 9/11. And then I thought, okay, well, I have this ability, but there must be people out there much better. And then I find autobiography of a yogi, and then it sends me on this journey to find these great siddhas, saints, avatars, as you will. And it's just been a driving force of my life and my path.
Wow. So what can I just kind of reel back and ask,
Sure.
and you said you had this recognition or realization or shift that told you that you had healing capabilities soon after 9/11. Do you want to detail?
Well, it was in the moment. So basically, that summer hanging out with him, I definitely felt stuff was happening. I'd be at a party, I'd say something very casually, and someone bursts into tears. My energy was different, but I didn't know what was happening. I didn't have a kind of concrete thing that I could point to with my still very Western way of seeing things. And I'm in a car with a friend of mine, the same one that I drove by the World Trade Center with on September 10th. And I even remember when we drove by it, I look up and I go, I wonder what would happen if that fell down. That was it. There was no
Wow.
other thoughts attached to it. Just that. Falls down. Then I'm with that same woman in a car in front of my parents' house, and she was having an angina attack. And I just wanted her to stop crying, and I didn't think about it. I reached out my hand. I felt this weight on her chest energetically. I pulled it away. She was kind of startled. She's like, "What'd you do?" I go, "I don't know." She goes, "Well, it doesn't hurt." I go, "I guess that's good." And I knew at that moment I'd obviously tapped into something. But for me, I didn't trust her. She had a very high opinion of me. And I said, "Well, you got to do this on people that don't believe in it." And that's, that's always the thing about this stuff. I think there's these people out there, they say, "You got to believe in healing for it to work." And I go, "No, you don't." I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't, it can help. I'm not trying to say that it won't, but these things are what they are. And it's just a matter of, is somebody ready to let go of it, even if they don't consciously aware of it.
Yes. 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 Wow, that's quite the story. So that led you to want to find out and be in the presence of siddhas and masters. And
Well, so then it was the Qigong master, because then that was kind of the only thing that I knew of, my experience, that was legit. And then my gift awakens, and I'm in Key West, Florida. I see Autobiography of a Yogi at a juice bar, and I'm just I start reading it. And I think I'd seen the book around before because it is kind of a spiritual classic, but I never really fully been drawn to it. And then suddenly I was, and I went, "Wow, this book is incredible." And I really delved into it, and I thought, these beings must still exist. I mean, new ones, and I really want to find them. And it was, a slow rollout at first, and then I started meeting more and more of them, and started seeing miracles in person for myself. Um, there was a woman in the Bay Area, and they call her. There's a book about her. It's called Shirdi Sai Baba of South San Francisco.
oh, really?
And yeah, very long title for a book. Um, and she will go into a trance sometimes, get taken over by Shirdi, and then start to physically look like Shirdi Sai Baba, and even take on his personality. And then she'll materialize Rudraksha seeds, or she'll materialize holy ash. I wasn't there for it, but I've heard on some occasions she materialized money for some people. There's no limits as to what they can do. But the first time I went, it fully happened. I went a few other times and it didn't happen, and then one time it was partial. But my very first time going, it happened completely, and that was a pretty amazing experience. And I had felt a connection to Shirdi, and getting to see that was pretty amazing for me.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I've had experiences with Shirdi Sai Baba, and I really feel his presence oftentimes. And it's almost like I can see his form,
Yeah.
and he'll tell me, give me messages and things like that. But that must have been really cool to witness that.
Oh yeah. It just felt like a waking dream, and
Mhm.
just kind of watching it. She materialized. Well, I guess he materialized, I should say, at that moment, right? A Rudraksha seed, which was for my protection, and then this mint leaf. And then I ate the leaf, and the moment I ate it, I felt this huge energetic shift, kind of in my, stomach, diaphragm, somewhere around there. And I just went, "Whoa." And yeah, it was a really amazing experience. So
Wow.
that was a big one. And then with Qigong, he's passed on, but there was a guy in LA I used to see, Master Zhou. And Master Zhou you had to tell him hot, because the chi that he would generate would could burn you. He could put a second-degree burn on you. And so you had to say hot, so he'd move somewhere else. And the skeptics will say, "Oh, it was chemicals." But when his hand wasn't above it, it wasn't hot. And when his hand was above it, it was excruciatingly hot. And it tended to be more hot wherever I had issues. Where if I didn't have an issue, it was more of like a nice, warm, toasty feeling.
Hmm.
And then, and he could do other pretty amazing things. And I got to see him a few times, and took people to see him as well. He was amazing.
Yes. Well, I think it's easy unless you've actually had the direct experience of being in the presence of a saint, a siddha, or a master yogi, or a master qigong master, you know, the mind will get involved and just say, oh, you know, people imagine it, it's not real, it's scammy, spammy, it's not true, and all of that. But when you're actually in the presence of a great being and you feel their energy directly, there's no place in the mind. The mind just, the mind, it just boggles the mind completely. And then you see evidence of it. There's always evidence, right, that shows itself, as it did with you through your healing abilities. So then after that, you went to India. Is that what happened?
So I'm trying to think. You know, I think I saw her after I'd gone to India, maybe. I couldn't remember for sure. But you know, I've been blessed also to see another great yogi in recent years named Guru Dev Brahmarishi. And I went to see him, and it materializes a little stone for me. And then I lose it. And I go to see him again the next year. And I have two major prayers. One is make a bigger version of that stone. And my deeper prayer was to have perfect sight, meaning I want to see things as they actually are, from all the lifetimes, from the past, the present, the future, and from the highest perspective. Because the only reason we get angry and upset is we don't see things as they are. We get caught in kind of the maya of it, the play, and how we think things should be or shouldn't be. And I went up to him, and initially nothing happened. And I get offline, and this guy comes up to me, and he goes, you know Carla. Now, Carla is a Portuguese woman that I'd met at Ama Karunamai's ashram. And on our way to Tiruvannamalai, we had come across, I'd said, let's go to his ashram. So we went there. He wasn't really available that time. We still had some nice meditation, puja, and all of that. So this guy, she had come to an event they had in Europe somewhere, probably in Portugal, maybe somewhere else. So, and he had asked her how she knew of Guru Dev Brahmarishi, and she mentioned me. And so he immediately recognized me, and he told me, get back online. I said, okay. So I get back online. Everyone's screaming at me because you're not allowed to be online more than once. And I go, I don't know anything. That man told me to get online. Take it up with him. And he was pretty high in the organization. So everyone just left me alone after that. And I'm online, and he materializes a bigger version of the same stone. And he tells me to put it on my third eye. And he say, may Shiva give you supreme sight. And I hadn't said anybody to anybody, so nobody knew that that was my prayer. And for the most part, he really didn't say much to anyone, at least that I witnessed during those blessings. He might have said, you know, I love you, I bless you, but he didn't of that specific of a nature. And this next part, I'm hesitant to say because I'm not 100% sure this is what happened, but I think it did. I think when he initially materialized the stone, it was dark on top. And then I put it on my third eye, and he said, may Shiva give you supreme sight. And then it was clear. Like it was white on top. So that I don't have supreme sight yet for any of those who are going to start trying to get those messages from me. But what was funny was quite a few years later, we talked about Nadi leaf readings. They mentioned at some point that I'll see the past, the present, and the future of myself and who I encounter. So it was cool to see. I was like, oh, wow, his what they will call sankalpa. So when a great yogi says this will be, then it must be. And they mentioned that in my Nadi leaf reading. So it was cool to see that come back around again.
It's interesting that your journey started with a problem with your body, right? With your knee and an injury. And I think what happens with many people, as in my case, there's something that happens with the body that you're trying to heal that really gets your attention. In my case, it was I had 2 bulging discs, and it was just agonizing. And I was kind of depressed at the idea.
Yeah, same. I had some degree of that. Yeah.
Because people will tell you, oh, you're going to have to learn to live with this. You'll probably be on medication for the rest of your life.
Nobody said the last one to me, but the other one, you know.
Yes. And so that really propelled me on. I know I came into this world with this desire to know truth and to find someone or something that could reflect back to me what I innately knew within my being, that these things, these mysteries, the magic, the supernatural, call it whatever you want, right, was all true and it was accurate. And I wasn't just imagining it. And I've often shared this, but I was having, out-of-body experiences and visitations from angelic beings, and, all kinds of things. What I could say were crazy things, before I understood what it was about. Since I was very, very young. And I think it's true of a lot of people. What happens because of being in the West, and we're taught to believe that the intellect is much more valuable than one's intuition, and that a lot of this stuff that we're feeling and perceiving isn't true, it's imagination. Then it's easy to kind of repress or deny our intuitive knowing, our true nature, in favor of what the world kind of sells to us.
Well, what I try to do is, if they have that framework and they say, "Oh, it's the placebo effect," and I'll say, "Well, your whole existence is the placebo effect if you want to get down to it." But let's run with what you're saying. You're saying it's a placebo effect. What is making the placebo effect work? The mind. So is it scientific to create an arbitrary limit for how effective the placebo effect is without a tremendous amount of research? That's not actually the science. Like, if there was a pill that had the results of the placebo effect, they wouldn't sort of cut it off at a certain point and say, well, it will only work to this extent, but no more. Mm-hmm. They would fully investigate it. And then so it goes back to the mind. And not everyone's mind as cultivated, as strong as someone else's mind. And so, look at it that way. I don't mind looking at it that way. Let's say it's the placebo effect. Then make the placebo effect stronger. And there's ways to do that. And it would be called meditation. It would be called qigong. It would be called mantra, deeper breathing, whatever you want. But there is a way to make this mind stronger, to make the placebo effect work in ways that we have not considered that are possible. And I think that's a much more to speak their language, to speak to them in a way that they might understand. Because I think the biggest mistake, some of the people that I come across that are in the spiritual worlds that we both reside in, is they're always trying to explain things from the way they understand it. And that's not doing that person any good. So try to speak to them from that framework. And it still might not work, but at least, hey, if they're engaging with you and you feel something, you can speak to them in a way, in a language that may resonate more. So they don't have to look at it about angels and siddhas and yogis and any of that. They could just start with, wait, the placebo effect is real. That means the mind has an influence on us that we have not considered, to the extent of what that could be.
Yes. And look, I don't know whether it's just you, but I really don't try to convince anybody of anything, to be honest. I really just don't. That's not my business. That's not my job. That's not my...
No, I totally get that. I do think that whatever it is about my personality is I draw people in that they claim to be skeptics or doubters, but I think on some level they're not. Otherwise, why are they trying to talk to me about it? So I try to share it with them in a way that may help them to explore.
Yes, which is great.
That kind of thing. And I can't make anyone do anything, of course. And I'm very quick to just, hey, I said what I said. You'll do with it as you see fit. And if you want to ignore it, you'll ignore it. But I also feel that truth has a ring to it. And even if someone doesn't cognitively believe it, it's still hitting them on a certain way.
Yes.
And you've had those experiences.
Yes, there's the Shakti, there's the resonance, there's the vibration. So you've traveled around India as well as some areas in the US, right? Tracking down these great beings.
So one that I spend a lot of time with right now, this time of year, she's in the US. Her name is Sri Amma Karunamai. She's also known as Vijayaswara Devi, and her birth was prophesied by Ramana Maharshi. I first met her in 2009. She was the first being that I experienced mental telepathy with without having physically met.
Wow.
So I saw her photo in a Krupalo magazine. not something I would normally ever look at. No shade to Kripalu. It's just not, I just don't look at those things. And I saw her photo and I thought, huh, she's coming to New York. I'm going to go see her. And I told a bunch of friends, and I would write down her schedule every day. It was the thing I was doing. I just kept writing it down over and over again. It was very locked in. And that particular time in my life, I had a big emotional heartbreak, and I was really wondering what it would take to get enlightened. I sort of realized the only love that was worth anything was the love of a saint. Everyone else's love was conditional. And the only thing that I was offering was that same conditional love. Maybe it was a little better. I don't know, but it wasn't unconditional. And I thought, well, if you really want to love other people, you gotta love them the way a saint would. You got to become enlightened. It was a very simple, quick kind of thought process for me. And I was wondering, what do I got to do to get enlightened? And so I go to see her, and I've seen other saints at this point, so she wasn't my first holy person. And I'm sitting there, and first there's some very nice peace. And then suddenly I get more angry than I've ever been without a reason, without a catalyst. And I felt like I was going to implode. And then I had this very clear thought of, you weren't this bad of a person 20 minutes ago. And I was like, yeah, I definitely wasn't. Okay. Sort of an understanding of this feeling, this anger, this rage is going to pass. And I get up to her, and she says a few things to me about my life. She touches me here. It felt like my head cracked open, and I was sobbing. And I felt all this stuff was just ripped off. And I was just kind of shell-shocked. And she had told me that in this lifetime that I would reach enlightenment. And I think prior to that, I may have had a psychic or two that had said that, but none of them were existing in that state. So it wasn't that I disbelieved them, but they hadn't crossed the finish line. They didn't exist from that state of knowing. And this was a being that did. And then she gave me this tremendous experience. And I was just kind of, oh, wow.
Beautiful.
And everything just stops. And that was such my prayer going in there. I was just mad for God at that time. It was just this, what do I got to do? What do I got to do to get enlightened? Tell me. And she gave me that blessing, and I felt a lot of karma was ripped off me. And I've done the best I can to be of service. Everyone always likes to say they're of service to their guru, but to me, that's kind of a trick of the mind. I may be of service to her organization. I may be of service to the humanitarian causes, and sometimes being a vessel that brings people to her. But I am not of service to her. That's laughable to me.
Yes. Yeah, because it's about global service. And she's just the form, right? She's the form in which the formless manifests.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. Well, I have a really quite an amazing story that I often reflect on. But when I lived on another island, Grand Bahama Island, which is the island nearest to Florida, for some years, I used to go to a beautiful yoga studio with a wonderful yoga teacher. And at the end of the yoga class, she would do yoga nidra. And I, rather than lying down on the floor, I would just sit cross-legged and, go into yoga nidra. And at the end of one of the yoga nidra sessions, I had this whole vision with Amma, the hugging guru. And I've never met her in person. I'd heard about her, but I didn't know a whole lot about her. But I had this whole vision. She came running towards me with the most beautiful shawl, and she said, "I have something for you." And she threw the shawl over my shoulders, and then she gave me a massive, great big hug, and then she pulled back a little bit, and she kissed me 3 times here, in the third eye, and was laughing and just holding me and just, and then she left. So, the Shakti in that was just incredible. And then maybe 10 days later, something like that, I had a letter and a package that came from my sister in the UK, who lives in the UK. And she said that she had heard that the hugging guru, Amma, was going to be in London, and she was intrigued. And so she went along and she had darshan with Amma. And she said it was really intense because there were a lot of people. But after darshan, Louise decided to go into the bookstore. So she goes into the bookstore, and there's all kinds of paraphernalia and there's books and everything. And Louise said she just got this huge kind of message to get something for me. So Louise is looking around and she sees this stack of shawls. And so she said, I have to get Julie a shawl. So she, decides on which one, and she holds it, she pays for it, and she's got the shawl in the bag. And then she pulls the shawl out to look at it. And then she said she heard Amma laughing, and Amma was right behind her. So Louise turned around. She still had the shawl, on her chest. And Amma just shakes her head, hugs up Louise, really holds her tight to her, and then pulls back. And then she takes the shawl and she kisses the shawl 3 times in the same way that she kissed me. And Louise said, thank you. Because she knew I would have loved to have been there with her, and I couldn't, I was in the Bahamas. So Louise...
Well, you were there with her.
Yes, I was there. So,
this goes back to the whole teaching, right? We're not the body. And so we might feel like we are a lot, but in that moment, in that experience, all of it was confirmed.
Yes. And I hadn't had a conversation with Louise. She didn't know, she didn't even know who Amma was, actually. The only reason she said she was interested was because my husband and I had gone with Louise when we were in London and taken her to see Mother Mira, I think a couple of years before. So she had, felt something and thought it was a really cool experience. And then so she saw, this hugging guru, Amma, and she was close by. So she thought, well, let me go. She had no clue. So, these things just boggle the mind, right? But what happens is, I think when you have a shift of consciousness or an awakening, whatever you want to call it, you're kind of then drawn into the mystery, the magic, the kind of, I don't know, limitless expanse of this kind of grace. And I don't want to say it becomes normal, because it's kind of never normal. It's just so exquisite. But it becomes more kind of known to you and acceptable to you. And you just say, of course, of course, this is how it works. It's amazing.
I remember one time I saw hugging Amma, and logistically I wanted to be around Amma Karunamai, but it just didn't work out. And I go up there and really thinking about Karunamai, and they start playing a song that I didn't hear as much at Hugging Ammas that I would hear all the time at Karunamai. And this guy takes an interest in me. He's like, you sit here and meditate. And normally, if anyone's gone to these events, you sit and meditate around Amma on stage. I don't know what you get, like 15 minutes at most, right? They had me up there for at least an hour. And I don't mean it felt like an hour. I mean, it was at least an hour. And I was just sitting and meditating. And I feel there was something else to it that made me really think and feel Karunamai. But those were, the things. And, ultimately any saint that is a true saint, you can experience your divine guru through them.
Yes. Yes.
And in that moment, I was being granted that experience. I'd seen Hugging Amma many times, and I certainly had some nice experiences. I didn't have that what you had. That was meant to be given to me by Karunamai, and obviously a very beautiful experience with Gurudev Brahmarishi, and some incredible meditations with Mother Mira or Shiva Rudra Bala Yogi or others. And then a few that I saw around Tiruvannamalai. At the end of the day, they all serve their place and time that you're meant to receive their darshan, their blessings, autobiography of a yogi, Walking with the Himalayan Masters, Muktananda's book talking about all the different siddhas that he had met. They're all here helping us on our journey to the highest level of, that we can reach.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I often say that after Bhagavan Nityananda of Ganeshpuri gave me Shaktipat Diksha in a lucid dream, decades ago, it was like he gave me the key to his home and his family. Because then I started to have these dream darshans with extraordinary beings that I had never heard about before. Like Swami Ram Tirth. I had never heard of him. I hadn't studied, or read anything about him. But he appeared in a lucid dream, and I could tell from his state that he was an extraordinary siddha. And the first thing he said to me was, I can give initiation. Would you like? So, of course, I said, yes, please. And so he took his thumb and pressed his thumb at the third eye area. And, I was filled with the most incredible Shakti. And so, out of that dream, then I went, once I'd woken up and kind of came back to earth, I did some research, and because there he was, there's a photo of him as a mathematician. He was renowned in India. He was, a siddha. And that has happened many times. I had a dream darshan with the mother. Her name was. She was the consort of Sri Aurobindo, and I'd never heard of her before. But she, when I did the research after the dream, was exactly as I'd seen her in the dream, and she held me. I'd been praying to God and saying, "Look, what am I supposed to do? I wasn't happy in a job that I was in. Should I quit, or should I, try and hang in there?" And then I had this dream darshan with her, and I asked the same question, and then she just hugged me and she said, "It doesn't matter." She said, "It's up to you. You can stay or you can go. It doesn't matter." And she's hugging me up and just kissing me, and I'm crying, I'm crying, I'm crying, I'm crying. But I came out of it and everything was resolved. I was perfectly okay. I knew that I should stay where I was, and then when the time was right for me to leave, then I would leave. And so I've had a tremendous number. I've been very, very fortunate, very blessed, purely because of the fact that Bhagavan Nityananda gave me Shaktipat Diksha and then kind of opened all these doors. It's like he introduced me to all these great beings. And I've been extremely fortunate. And I've often, like I said, had to do research to find out, because I'll usually say, I recognize that they're a great being, and I'll say, "Can you please, what is your name? What is your name?" Ramakrishna Paramahansa was another one. He just kind of walked. I was having what I call a normal, ordinary dream. I was, having this dream where I was at this party, this kind of cocktail party in the Bahamas under the palm trees. It's a beautiful night. And, as usual, I'm just kind of standing there thinking, it just isn't doing it for me. I'm so bored. I want to go home. And then at the kind of walking behind me and going across, the side field of my vision is Ramakrishna Paramahansa. And I could not believe that nobody saw him and nobody recognized him and nobody knew who he was. So I just ran after him like a crazy person, and I, pranamed, and then, went down onto all fours. And he didn't say a word, but he walked over the back of my head and down, and then he disappeared. And when I stood up, I realized he'd entered my body and entered my being, and I could feel him. I could feel his Shakti. It was so incredible. And so, after the fact, I went and did the research and discovered who he was and everything, and had read his story and all of those things. But you get, again, the mind, you could never kind of figure that out in the mind. It's not possible, right? To try and construct all of that and have these kinds of experiences. And the thing is that they're incredible gifts of grace, because even as I'm speaking about these experiences now, decades later, the full impact of the Shakti is still present. When we speak the name of a great being, a great Siddha or a saint or enlightened being, the Shakti is still there, because the name of that being is Chaitanya. It's aligned with the Shakti, and there's a transmission in that. And again, the mind you can never fathom that out in the mind. It's beyond the mind.
I think the other thing is, when it comes to Shakti, or whatever word anyone wants to use for it, I think there's a certain level of sensitivity that people have to feel it. Because you'll see some people go and they'll just be knocked out and they weren't expecting it. And other people, they go, well, that was nice, but they weren't. Where I think with some certain types of miracles, you don't have to believe to recognize a miracle happened. You don't have to even feel sometimes, because you're literally just seeing it. And I remember I spent some time with a saint named Vasa Amma from Andhra Pradesh. And Vasa Amma, is pretty common verbooty. And I'm not talking like, small amounts. I'm not talking like skeptic will say, oh, you could hide that in between the fingers in a capsule, and you break it open. I'm talking like making it rain, just making the verbooty or the kumkum just pour out. And those are the types of moments where people's reason cannot resist anymore. Because I do feel, for a lot of people, even if they feel something, they can kind of brush it off. Mm-hmm. But when you see the miracle, when you see something materialize, and I haven't witnessed this, but I have friends that did, he'll materialize little tree chakras, that are like 2-3 kilograms, just boom, there it is, right? It's harder to brush that off.
Yes.
Master Joe burning you without touching you. And it's not even to say that those things are higher. I don't necessarily think they are. I'm just saying they're more of a secular person can acknowledge something's going on.
Yes.
And I feel that miracles are avatars, siddhas, saints, greeting cards. It's kind of, hey, pay attention, wake up.
Yes.
And that's the purpose of it. And then for you, obviously, then to, get more serious with your sadhana, and not necessarily to be chasing miracles, though they certainly can be beautiful and enjoyable things, and other psychic phenomena. You can get caught in the chase of that. Now, that being said, I still think it's better to chase that than, alcohol and drugs.
Yeah.
And buying useless things that you don't need and storing them somewhere, right? So, I think if you're going to chase something, it seems, especially if it's coming from a genuine saint, someone who's not wanting anything from you other than your upliftment.
Yes, yes. Well, the another kind of aspect to what we're speaking about with respect to these great beings is that they will often address physical issues or issues that relate to the reasons why you're getting sick. Because what comes to my mind was I think it was just before I received Shaktipat in a lucid dream. I'd been invited to go to these groups that would meditate, and then there'd be channeling. So I got involved a couple of times, and then for whatever reason, channeling started to happen, through me, and it felt really powerful. And a lot of people were like having these experiences, but after two or three times of doing it, I kind of knew that it wouldn't lead me anywhere, and it wasn't for me, even though some people think, it's great and it's amazing and it's wonderful and it helps to, elevate and expand you. I just knew that was not my path. I was just meant to experience it and then move on. So I just kind of left the group. But there was a residual thing that started to happen after I'd been involved with the channeling, and that is that I kept getting sick with these kind of minor ailments, like a flu or stomach bug or something would happen, and I'd never felt like I was fully optimal in terms of my health and well-being. It was just like I was always like in second or third gear, the best of times. And I remember one day I was at work and I wasn't feeling well again. And I was thinking, geez, it's like I've got a flu or stomach or something's happening. I'm not feeling so good. So I left work, went home, and I lay down on the bed. I think at this time I'd maybe just started going to meditation with the Siddha group. So I was utilizing the mantra Om Namah Shivaya. I think it was just before I got Shaktipat in the lucid dream, I think. But, I was repeating Om Namah Shivaya, and then I fell into this dream state, and then I was aware that I was dreaming, and I realized this is a dream and I'm dreaming. And then one of the Siddha masters walked into the bedroom and looked down at me, and then she started to draw an egg shape, and she drew this shape, and she said it was a subtle body, and she said there are cracks in the subtle body, and she went 1, 2, 3, and she said because of the channeling there are cracks in the subtle body. And then she sat down, and then like 5 or 6 inches above the body she was kind of running a hand down, and I knew she was healing the cracks. And so then after a while, when she'd finished, she just stood up, and left the room, walked away. And
So, can I ask a couple questions? So when you were
yes,
channeling, were you like taking on different voices? Were you kind of giving kind of
yeah,
like a psychic medium? Like what was going on? And do you feel that anyone that channels will have that occur?
I really can't say because I wasn't doing it long enough to be able to kind of have data, if you want to put it like that. I used to protect myself. I, do the wall of light or whatever, bubble of light around me, and I would say my prayers and invocations and all of those things, and I'd call in for the highest beings to come in with, that all everything. I felt I'd followed all of the protocols.
Yeah.
However, this is what this Siddha master told me, and I know she's absolutely on point. It was true because I had been sick for, quite a while, on and off. And then after she'd done the healing and she left, I just felt like I had so much energy. I was feeling great and everything was wonderful. And it also really confirmed what I had intuited and knew was true, that channeling was not going to take me anywhere. I'd just be spinning wheels, spinning wheels, spinning wheels. And there was a much, and this can sound egotistical, but I knew there was a higher purpose in terms of what I was being called to, and channeling wasn't it. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to anybody that channels or thinks, gets value from it. But for me, I knew it wasn't, it wasn't what I was being called to. And
Well,
yeah,
one of the things I find funny about a lot of the people that I'll see out there, mostly online, I don't really go to the events in person, and they'll say they're channeling. And I'll listen and I go, well, that just sounds like common sense to me. Or that just sounds like you're rehashing Nisargadatta Maharaj, or any of that. And I'll just kind of sit there and go, what makes this channeling, right? Like that's
yeah,
because I guess for me, when I think of channeling, I know there's a Tibetan Buddhist Lama that does channeling, and he goes into some state and he delivers messages. But when I think of channeling, I sort of think of, you could say, I don't know, that woman she's channeling Shirley Sai Baba. She was, physically altering. She would materialize stuff and then, go back to whatever it is. So, I guess there's also different levels of channeling, but a lot of these people that claim that they're channeling, I
Mm-hmm.
just feel like it's just basic intuition, common sense, and rehashing what masters are saying. And then they're changing the labeling around it, and they're telling me they're a channel and maybe working with the Galactic Federation of Light. I'm
Yeah.
not saying the Galactic Federation of Light doesn't exist. I'm just saying I find it interesting that there's nothing they're telling me that I haven't read in in any of these books, or the other people haven't told me. So I get confused sometimes. I go, what's making that channel? Why is
Yes.
this channel? And
Yes.
they don't feel that I don't feel that this is always the thing when it comes to the spiritual metaphysical stuff. There's these people that are shutting the door on it immediately. And then there's people that just come up with a cool story, tell them what you are, and they'll jump on board.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Look, I mean, I can say when I think about that period when I was channeling, it was like after I'd done the kind of invocations, the prayer work, and all of those things,
Yeah.
it felt like I, as a story, or whatever, got out the way, and then I just felt this tremendous energy coming in, and I would get like pins and needle tingling from head to foot, and I
Yeah.
would come out of it not remembering anything that was said,
Oh wow, you didn't even remember what she said to people.
and then people were taking notes, and they were having really big experiences,
Yeah.
which was why too they kept trying to pull me back into doing it
Because you
because
were natural, you were really good at it, and it was
so I
they felt it
yeah
was advantageous to them. Maybe not to you, but to them,
yes.
they're
Yes,
you
so
know.
I knew it was, it wasn't what I was being called to. But I just found that really intriguing that, that attack, because I'd never heard of cracks in the subtle body before. You know what I mean? That wasn't part of my lexicon as a Catholic growing up in the UK. But I guess that what I'm pointing, the whole point of that story is that I've also had many experiences where I've been, had ailments and things like that. And these Siddha masters have appeared in lucid dreams and, pressed different points on the body. Or I had one lucid dream, where I was given kind of a green liquid to drink, and then they were rocking me. And then I was just kind of puking all this bile up, and I knew it related to past lives or trauma or whatever it was, or emotional wounding. And I honestly again came out of that dream feeling reborn. I mean, there's no other word for it. And I'd never read anything like that before. I didn't know that kind of thing was even available, so to speak. But I think this is part and parcel of the saints and the siddhas and the yogic way of working with people, because there's no time, there's no limitation in terms of space, there's no limitation in terms of anything really, and it's quite phenomenal the way it works.
I remember one time I was getting ready to go to India to see Amma Karunamai, and I was staying in Venice, California, sleeping on my friend's rooftop, and it was slightly chilled. And I woke up and I, I could smell jasmine, and there was no flowers or plants, and it was cold at nighttime, and I could just so vividly smell it, and it's just some sort of visitation, and it was just such a great feeling. And I've definitely had some of these types of experiences and dreams, and I tend not to talk about them as much because I guess I feel like because I do interact so much with people that are already so skeptical, or I want to share the stuff where I can tell you about a dream. Anyone can tell you about a dream, and it's not to in any way put those things down, because I know people have had some pretty profound ones and visions and things that really later you can look at it objectively and go, oh wow.
Yes.
um But I do feel that, there's just stuff that's available right now to kind of shake them if they're open to being shook. And not
Yes.
everybody wants to get their reality all shaken up. They're very
No.
comfortable sleeping.
Yeah.
And
Exactly. Exactly. Well, also, the thing that I often reflect on is when I was at an ashram, I was on staff at an ashram in India
yeah,
from 2001 to 2004. And I had gone there anticipating I would, be more of the same, out of body experiences, wonderful darshans with great beings and meditation and, being off schedule and all those great things. And, I got there and then was hit with the shadow. I'd never heard of the shadow, but there was a lot of anger that was coming up, frustration, irritation, just really heavy, heavy, heavy stuff. And I didn't know what to make of it. I really didn't have a clue. I'd never been in therapy. I'd never, had a counselor or anything, growing up in a working class environment in the UK. I mean, what's that? You just kind of get on with life and suck it up. So there I am. I was invited to do some seva in the library, an additional seva in this beautiful library that had the most incredible books. There was, books on Buddhism and Sufism and Islam and all kinds of things. So my job was to just dust down the shelves. And so just before I went there, I just kind of thought, I really need some help figuring out why all these negative moods and feelings are coming up. I don't know what this means. So just kind of threw that one out. And then I went to do my saver, and I've got my little feather brush and I'm going up and down the shelves, wiping all the shelves. And there's nobody in there. The library was closed while we did the cleaning. And literally a book in the middle of the aisle pounced off the shelf and landed at my feet. I was so astonished because there was absolutely no reason. There was no way this could happen. And so that really got my attention. So I went and picked it up. And it was by someone I'd never heard of, Mrs. Irina Tweedy, who is a Sufi master. And the book was titled Chasm of Fire. And I knew I could feel this incredible Shakti. I knew it had purpose and meaning for me. So I thought, I have to sign this out. And then when I've got some time, just go sit with it. So I take the book out and I opened it in the first kind of insert pages. And there was a quote from her. And it went something like this. She said, I went to India in search of my guru in the hope that he would show me God. Instead, he forced me to look at the deepest, darkest places within me, and it almost killed me. And so it's like, oh my gosh, this was exactly what was happening. And so I took that book as like prasad, and I studied that book. And then through reading that book and her experiences, I then found out about Llewellyn Vaughan Lee, who's also part of the Golden Sufi organization. And he was writing about, dreams, studying your dreams, and which was great for me, and understanding the shadow and understanding what happens after an awakening and the importance of doing shadow work. Because he said, unless you deal with the shadow, you can become very unstable because the light of the self is so profound. It's so huge. It can really kind of throw you off balance, which is why we have seen evidence of people having these shifts of consciousness and then going into the whole spiritual bypassing route because they don't want to deal with their pain. They don't want to deal with the psyche. So he was, and Mrs. Irina Tweedy were very grounded in terms of the way they taught about the importance of doing the shadow work. So, all of that happened just through me asking. And then this book lands at my feet. And, those kinds of things have happened many, many times but again, to the kind of, let's say, ordinary intellect, it's like, what is this?
Well, but I think the other side now of shadow work that I hear or I witness in the New Age world is an obsession with it. Is
Yes.
like it's all they talk about. Ah, my
Yes.
shadow, and they're just the shadow, and they're like enamored with their whatever the dysfunction is.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes. So, yes,
yeah,
it's important, and I've talked about this a few times on my
yeah,
channel. It's important to do the work, right? But for goodness sake, don't drop anchor there. Don't turn that into another identity, which is what
yeah.
I've seen happening. Just deal with it, look at it, and then because
Keep it moving.
the whole point is to recognize what has always been here and is always here prior to any story, no matter whether the story's filled with angst and trauma and whatever. As amazing as those stories can be, who you are is prior to the story and have always been prior to the story. But of course, what can happen is, unless you confront the psyche or have a conversation with the psyche or embrace it, however you want to put it, then you'll just keep chasing the highs, which is, absolutely running away from the authenticity of your true self, which also honors the story, that you don't get trapped, in that whole kind of storyline. Or the idea of, improving it, or I need to do more inner child work, or I need to deepen my shadow work. You're just, again, all you're doing is just, it's like rearranging the furniture in a room, right? And you still haven't stepped outside of that room, that environment.
Yeah,
So it has its place, but it's important not to get stuck there.
yeah, absolutely. It has its place, but don't obsess over it. Don't ignore it, but don't dwell on it either.
Yeah,
And
because
just find the
there's an end to it, And what I've found with many people, especially in spiritual communities, is it's continually reinforced. Like you were saying, this, oh, you should meditate more, you should do more shadow work, you should more, 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 more.
Well, then I can sell you my course, How to
Yeah.
Remove Your Shadow in 3 weeks.
Yes. Or, instead of just, leaving it be, and just being where you are and paying attention to what is happening, right? Which is the whole point.
I think one of the small miracles that I really like is when I don't consciously choose to meditate and it just takes me over. And I've had it happen in random public places. And I guess it can lead to kind of some very socially funny situations. But nonetheless, I don't care. When I'm blessed enough for that to happen, and it just overtakes me. And then there's just this, it's harder in those moments not to meditate than it is to meditate.
Mm-hmm.
You just, everything just gets still. Everything just stops. There's nothing to do.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one left to try. And you're just residing in that.
That's the whole point, right?
I remember I used to go to Whole Foods and this guy in New York on the second floor, and I met this guy. He just started telling me miracle stories about a guru. And I guess I would sort of spontaneously go into some type of bliss. And then he'd stop and he's like, "What's happening?" And I go, "I don't know." And then we'd go on and he'd tell me his stories. And that definitely, was one of the final prompts to get me to go to India in 2007. But just he'd start talking about it and I would just go into bliss. And it was at New York City and Whole Foods on the second floor. It just, there's no rules about
No.
when and where these things can transpire. It's beautiful to have a shrine and a setup and a quiet place and waterfalls and all of that magic. But God is not limited to those spaces and places alone.
Well, I guess we should wrap this episode up. So thank you so, so much for joining me. As always, this has been great. I've really enjoyed it.
Same.
And thank you, everybody, as always, for joining us today on Talking True. If you enjoyed the content, then please share. And you know what to do when it comes to subscribing. Thank you so much. Take it easy. Be well. And bye for now.